This is episode 24, and today we are interviewing Scott Farace from Celero Commerce. Celero Commerce is a payment processing group, and we got to hear about Scott's background. He comes from the sport and entertainment industry, which is quite colorful. He may or may not have an direct influence on Jerry Maguire, the movie. More about that to come. But today we talk about how do you operate in a space that is heavily competitive with big players and smaller players in the bank and the financial institutions. Stay tuned. It's a great episode.
So a lot of times getting them to convert is, do I trust this person? Do I trust him as a salesperson?
Welcome to Memorable Marketing by MediaGroup. We are very proud to have Scott Farace here from Celero Commerce. Thank you for being here, Scott.
Thank you for having me, Thomas. It's a pleasure to be here and look forward to our discussion.
So do I. Thank you. So can you tell me, you and I had a chat last week and you said you had some pretty different approach to becoming a CEO. Can you tell us about that journey?
Sure. So my career path to get to being a CMO at Celero Commerce started. I went to grad school in Georgia, here in the United States, and I was studying the world of sports marketing, sports and entertainment marketing. And so while I was taking classes there, one of our professors owned a sports and marketing agency in Atlanta, and he offered all of us an exclusive opportunity to come and work for free and learn the business. And so at the time, I actually was serving as the assistant sports information director for the university. And so I had some time and I went and got my feet wet learning the business. And matter of fact, it was a great experience. My first client was Frito-Lay, their Southeast division, and got to run a program. I don't know if you grew up in the States and you're of my age, you'll remember a program. It was called Punt, Pass, and Kick. And it was run by the NFL, and kids you'd punt the ball, throw the ball, and kick the ball. They total your score. You advanced up, and you could actually go to one of the NFL games and perform and compete. And so Frito-Lay ran that contest with all their grocer partners. And what was great about it was I got to learn that business model. And that was, one of the threads throughout my whole career has been really enjoying learning different business models of different industries. And so learning how packaged goods worked in the retail space, especially the grocer space, was very interesting. Not something that you learn in business school at all. And learning how things operated and then tying that in with sponsorships and working with NFL teams. So we worked with the Miami Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and got to learn how to put programs together and then how to make them pay off at retail, right? And understanding who Frito-Lay's true customer was, which may have been the grocer, versus who the grocer's true customer was, which was the consumer. And so great path, great learning experience. Actually got offered a position to go work for that company before I even graduated, went to work for them. And then probably within 3 years, we sold that company to a much larger entity. It's called Advantage International. They're now called Octagon. They're a part of the Interpublic group of companies, I believe still. And so had a chance to then work inside a much larger agency, worked with some of the agents that represented players, learned that side of the business, got to work on the event side, running PGA tournaments, selling sponsorships, working with on-event activities for sponsors. Really did a lot on the corporate side of the business. So learning how corporations took major investments in sponsorships and had them pay off for them, and how did they integrate that into their marketing plans, right? So not only did it teach you how to leverage a partnership of multi-millions of dollars, but then also how to work with other partners. So for us, a lot of our companies that we worked with were very large Fortune 500. So UPS, Bank of America, Sears, MasterCard. They all had ad agencies. They had promotion agencies. They had media buying agencies. They had lots of different agencies. So our job a lot of times was, how do we work with all those agencies, pull them all together and get them all on board behind a Olympic sponsorship, a World Cup sponsorship, an NFL sponsorship, and so that they're all working together for the betterment of the brand that you're working for, right? And that's not always easy. Agencies don't always like to play nicely in the sandbox together. So learning diplomacy and learning how to get cooperative and collaborative efforts together was a great learning experience for me at a very young age, working for that agency. Long story short, the individual that had owned the first company I worked for did not like working for a larger company once he had sold it to them. So he came back they had sent him off to Europe to run the European division. He came back and said, "Hey, Scott, would you move with me to Texas? We're going to start another small agency there." And so moved to Dallas from Atlanta, and we started a sports marketing agency, sports entertainment marketing agency in Dallas, where we did everything from sports to worked on music tours with the Backstreet Boys and Gloria Estefan and Phil Collins, worked on entertainment tours like Ringling Brothers. So did a bunch of work around Ringling Brothers, worked on the Final Four, worked on the Super Bowl, worked on World Cup soccer, sold sponsorships for cricket worldwide, got to sail Dennis Conner's boat in the Stars and Stripes for the America's Cup out in San Diego. It was a great experience, had some great clients. Matter of fact, came your way with one of our clients was Bank of America, and they were a sponsor of the Olympics for the Sydney Olympics. And so we did a whole tour with them around the Sydney Olympics and brought the culture of Australia to the United States through Bank of America and their sponsorship of the Olympics. And great experience. And actually through that, Bank of America was one of my clients, and I had done a lot of work with financial institutions. So Bank of America, MasterCard, First Union. And so a company in Dallas called Payment Tech at the time, which did payment processing, was looking for someone to help them build their brand. And luckily for me, they wanted somebody young, somebody a little different than the normal marketing person in the payment space, somebody that had worked on major brands. And my boss at the time happened to have worked at MasterCard too. And so he kind of knew the space and knew what I was bringing to the table. And so I went from the glamorous world of sports and entertainment marketing to the even more glamorous world of payment processing.
Okay, that sounds good. When you chose to be in the sport and entertainment industry, did the movie Jerry Maguire influence you in any way? I have to ask.
It's funny you should say that. So one of the agents at Advantage International at the time was a consultant on that movie. So he helped consult on what that role should be. So it was funny having worked with him. I knew him, and I was like, "You're not Tom Cruise. You're not Tom Cruise at all." But it's funny. Yeah. No, you know what? I did most of my time was on the corporate side. So most of my time was working with the corporate clients and managing and developing their marketing efforts around the sponsorships. I will say this, from what I knew of talking to those agents, you don't want to spend a lot of time with the athletes because a lot of them were babysitting and they were taking calls at 2:00 in the morning because somebody had to be bailed out of jail.
Yep. Well, that's the role that goes to the territory. You take part of my salary, you're part of the team. So you got to figure all the stuff out. All right. Now you are at the Celero Commerce. And can you tell us more about what Celero Commerce is?
Sure. Celero Commerce is a payments company at the core. So the core of our culture is really about providing payment solutions to the small and medium-sized businesses in the country and giving them the same tools, same technology, same solutions to compete with the mass market retailers, the big players in whatever space they're in, be it restaurants, be it retail, be it e-commerce. And so we like to say that we enable them to compete and win against the bigger boys. And we do that multiple ways. We have multiple channels that sell to merchants. So we have a direct selling force. We also have a channel that we work with financial institution partners, so bank partners all over the U.S. and provide them the services that they provide to their merchants. And then we also work with integrated partners, so other software providers where we may be the payments provider of choice or one of the payment providers. And then we also own our own SaaS solutions for one in the field services industry that works with anybody that has a truck out in the field doing plumbing, HVAC, lawn care, pool care. We provide business management software that also integrates payments for them. And then we have another one that is a solution for small specialty retail stores, hardware, and compounding pharmacies across the United States.
Okay. And so whenever somebody has a business model, basically, is once you get a customer in and they run all their transactions through you, of course, you take a piece or a cut of that. That's how you get paid, right? Is that correctly understood?
Yeah, at the 100,000 foot level, that is absolutely right, Thomas.
All right, okay, just making sure. So just a little background. So 3 years at Celero. So how did Celero come about? Was that a merger between different companies, or?
So in background, the private equity company that backed us. So our CEO got to know the private equity team, and then they backed him on the thesis that we've built this company on, which is this very integrated approach to the marketplace for the SMB space. They started the company by purchasing one entity out on the West Coast. It was a large processor out there, worked mostly with banks. And so that was quickly followed by the purchase of a SaaS company, which was then quickly followed by the purchase of 3 companies, one which was based here in Nashville. Was coincidental too, totally. Our CEO had already decided he was going to headquarters the company in Nashville, and then one of those companies happened to be here in Nashville. So we bought 3 of them, and then that was followed. We actually bought 2 companies during COVID in the year of 2020. It just worked out, and one of them was the next largest company we've bought, which happened to be about equal in size to us at the time, but they were purely a direct-to-merchant play at the time, which was not really a piece of our puzzle. And so that kind of helped fill out that piece of the puzzle. They also owned a SaaS company that we brought in. And so we've now finished up our 8th acquisition. We're looking at 2 more this year, possibly. So that's what I say. When you ask what kept me up at night, I'll say that was a lot of activity in a short amount of time. And then a lot of it was during people are remote, and how do you handle that? Back in the days, creating a brand internally was much easier when everybody worked inside an office space, right?
So how do you go about competing in that space? It's a very competitive space, and how do you carve out a niche for you?
Sure. So our competitive advantage really in the marketplace, or our competitive positioning, really revolves around we try to be high tech and high touch at the same time. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a very competitive marketplace. But we like to say, for our small merchants, the technology solutions we bring them are state of the art. They're going to have the same things that Amazon has access to, that Walmart has access to, all being able to accept any form of payment anywhere, and provide them the ability to do that. And then also we provide that human touch. So we're here for them. They're not getting a pre-recorded message. They're getting a live person helping them with any of the issues that they have. And so, very simplistically, that is a kind of our approach to the marketplace. And, whether that be direct with merchants or with our partners, our bank partners, our integrated solution providers, we're making sure that they have that same feeling from us that we're trying to give directly to the merchant.
Okay. So again, it's a very competitive space, so you said, and we go back from the days of PayPal, so who sort of were the first ones to break that, where people could send money to each other independently, to now we have Square, we have all these different providers. How do you, what's your edge of difference between the customer service? What do you do to be in that space? Because there's a lot of money thrown at it. There's a lot of investment in that space.
You're right. And it's not only is it a very competitive space, but you have that unique positioning that it is also one that most merchants, so most businesses, prefer not to think about it on a day-to-day basis. And especially when you're dealing with the small and medium-sized merchants, they're probably confused by all the different solutions out there. They probably get 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 calls a day asking to have their processing switched. That might be through a bank, through an independent sales organization, through another acquirer, through a process. There's a lot of different approaches. And so, for a small and business owner, this can be a very confusing space. There's components to it, from the equipment to gateways, your virtual terminals, to how things are priced. And what we try to do is, we believe we're a very transparent organization, both internally and externally. And so we approach this market with the highest quality of respect for our merchants. And so we walk them through. If they don't understand something, our sales and service teams are there to really make sure they understand what is the best solution for them to be able to compete. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about, is how can we make sure that you can run your business so you can compete and win, whether you're the dry cleaner down the street or you're a multi-location franchise restaurant, right? You want to be able to compete, and you don't want to have to worry about this on a day-to-day basis. You want to make sure that money goes from that consumer account to your bank account.
Because once you get a customer, they stay for a long time, because the risk or the chance of switching from one company to another there's a lot of concern involved with that. So once you got them in, I presume they stay for a long time?
I think one of the things with that has really evolved since those days when I started at Payment Tech and now here at Celero Commerce. The evolution of the business management software, SaaS, solutions for merchants have really evolved and become much more available to everybody, right? At any size business. And that combination with the payments does make merchants much stickier. So it's a matter of getting them to that. And do you have the right combination for the right merchant? And I think, payments in the past had always been one of those things where, especially small merchants could switch every other week if they really thought that was what was the right solution for them. But, I think it's funny because there's a lot of similarities to when you look at the wireless industry, and not so much from the technology, but the way they marketed it, and, how they went from, it was a land grab when they started, right? And you're AT&T or Verizon or Sprint, T-Mobile, and you're out there, you're just picking up customers. Now everybody in the world has a smartphone. So now you're stealing share from one another, and it's a much different approach to the marketplace. So I think, going back to what you asked originally about, how do you position yourself differently? I think you stick to your guns on, we're going to provide you the best technology, the best solutions, and we're going to be able to pair that with people that really care about who you are as a business. And we're going to stake our claim on that and go to marketplace with that.
So let's talk about marketing. How do you position yourself? How do you tell your story? How does that get through? And what channels do you use? And what kind of message are you sending out there? How are you trying to be different in the marketing space?
I joked at the beginning here saying how exciting the payments world of marketing is in payments. But, in a lot of ways it is. It's a great challenge, and I love it because each channel is a little different. So when you talk about how do we market, I'll always go back to the first thing I've ever said is in the payment space in particular, in a lot of B2B space, your people, your sales bodies and your customer service bodies are your biggest marketing spends. So the fact that they understand our brand, they understand our brand message, they understand what we're trying to achieve as a company and organization, and making sure they're all aligned behind that messaging is step one, because they're the ones interacting and getting the messaging out to our customers on a day-to-day basis, right? Be it the bank partners, be it merchants directly. And so I think that's one of the core parts of this is from a marketing. I don't have Super Bowl ad spending money for a $7 million 30-second spot. So we make good use of our marketing dollars. Now, when you get into the different channels and what tactics and strategies we use, it varies a little. And so, when you own a SaaS company, pay-per-click digital marketing becomes very important. When you're traditional, selling to merchants in the payment space, you're out, feet on the street sales bodies are out knocking on doors, picking up phone and calling. Working with our bank partners, a lot of times it's arming them with the right marketing support material. So I'm marketing in partnership with them. So it does vary a little bit by channel, but it starts kind of with your people first.
All right. Can you give me an example of a marketing campaign that you are proud of, that really worked, or that story really worked? and how you implemented that?
I think some of the most impressive ones we've had, which are kind of these partnership programs with some of our banks. And, those relationships vary a little. And so with some of our bank partners, it is more like a white label process. So we're the behind the scenes. They're doing a lot of the upfront work, right? And for us, it's really working with them to provide them the right tools. So that might be sales sheets. That might be spinning up a landing page that has all the right key points and all the right solutions and technology language. A lot of times, for them, a bank partner, a bank, is selling a lot of different products and services, right? And payments tends not to be one of the priority products. And so a lot of times we have to work very hard with them. But to something you hit on, Thomas, earlier, for the banks, payments is a core part of how you keep your customers stickier, and how do you make sure that you have all parts of that? Because a lot of times we've had partners where they don't realize, oh, they're processing with my competitor down the street who may be using that as an in to get into them. And another point you brought up, there are companies out there like Square today who are getting into the loan business, right? They're getting into working with customers and loaning. And how do you think they're getting their fees out? They're taking it out of the money they're processing. So the bank now is seeing less in deposits. Well, depository relationships are very important to banks. So how do we work with them to ensure that they're seeing a end-to-end solution with their customers? And so some of the most successful ones we've had has been just working with our bank partners and putting together programs, to either show them how they can expand what across the base of customers they have today, right? And hey, here's a big chunk of customers you have that aren't processing with you. What do we have to do to move them and move that solution to you also? Or ones where we're working on referral programs with large bank partners on both coasts, where it's like, hey, how do we get your branches to be moving from one referral a week to 2 referrals a week or 3 referrals a week? And what do we have to do to make sure that payments is front and center, not an afterthought, but it's one of those, oh, by the way, don't forget about this too. You need this as a part of our solution with you.
Exactly. Can you tell me from one of your customers' point of view, their journey they go through? As you said, they might get 10 calls a day. They might have all these emails, all this material, and they're overwhelmed with data. How do you go in there and hold their hands and convince them that they should be with you? What's the process involved in that? Because once you get them in, they stay for a while, as we already talked about. But how do you go in there and get them to come to you, so to speak?
It starts with we have some really good, so you're talking about something where we're talking directly with a merchant. And a lot of times it's one of our reps, one of our sales reps or business development reps who's out there meeting with that customer. They're trying to convince them to switch. Usually what happens is the merchant's always like, what's the price? What's your rate? I'm paying 3% today, 2.75%, and so a lot of times, even though we don't like to, and we stay away from competing on price, we're not the bargain basement price. And to be honest with you, most people who lead with that are hiding something in your statements anyways. So a lot of times it's something as simple as, hey, let us review your statements and we can show you what your true rate is. What are you really paying versus what they're telling you you're paying, right? It's kind of like, go back to the wireless. You pay 20. Yeah, it's only $20 a line, and I've got 2 lines. So why is my bill $150 a month? Well, you have this tax, this fee, that FTC fee, right? So there's that component of it, but there's also the component of, hey, what's the right technology solution? It may be just an age-old terminal that we got to set up for you. Yeah. Well, they're going to walk them through that. They're going to handhold them. A lot of times it's just, hey, make sure this is set up. And, do I have paper stocked for this?
Yeah.
What happens if this goes down? Who do I call? How can you make sure my transaction? So a lot of times getting them to convert is that it's that same, like, do I trust this person? Do I trust him as a salesperson? Building that rapport with them. And so whether that rep is doing that face-to-face, because we do have reps that are out in the field, or they're doing it over the phone with them and they're convincing them that, hey, this is the right partner for me and they do have my best interests. And as I said, I think you can do that in multiple ways. And it's either showing them, and we have reps who will say, hey, listen, you know what? Your rate is this. We can't beat that. I can tell you right now, we're not going to be able to beat that rate. Now, we can offer you this solution, which might allow you to do this, this, or this. And that could be anywhere from, time saving, right? So making you more efficient, or it could be in the reporting you're getting and how you can see better data to help you improve your revenue gains, right? So there are a lot of different things that we hope we are arming our team with the ability to educate a merchant on to make them feel more comfortable to switch to us.
I like that. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, business is all about trust, like human beings. We trust another one, and I like what you're saying. If you go through the statements, you realize, hey, they might tell you one thing, but this is actually what's happening. Now you're creating distrust with their current user, and you say, hey, we come over to us. You can trust us because we're being transparent. I like that. That's definitely one way of doing it. I like that. Can you name me? You've had this very exciting journey as a CMO. Can you name me 3 things where you, as a CMO, before you started, you wish somebody told you that you had to find out on your own? If you understand the question, what have you learned in the process of being a CMO that no one told you that you wish you were told before you started?
I think I wish, and I tell my kids this too. I have 5 kids, and so I've told them all this when they go to school. Take psychology courses, take sociology courses, take communication courses. I don't care what job you do in the world, those 3 things will make you more successful. So I do think as a CMO is, being able to read situations, being able to read people, being able to read the marketplace, being able to read the industry. Those things are things that I didn't take a single course that told me any of that. Now, did we have market research that went out and did marketplace research? Yes, but I think being able to communicate at a fundamental level and then being able to read a room when you're in it. I mean, those are things that I think, probably more from failure than anything else, you've learned to say, oh, I probably should have said this, or I should have reacted this way, or I should have just kept my mouth shut, right? And you learn that. And I think, that all of those things come into play, whether you're selling your business, you're selling yourself, you're selling a service, you're selling a good. I think understanding that helps. And, the other thing I would have really liked more, and I think some of this had to do more with being on the agency side of the world for so long, but and I touched on this briefly, but understanding different business models and really understanding, the difference between consumer products and B2B products, which some people or most people understand that at a very high level, but then really digging in and understanding how financial service industries work. How does the insurance industry work? And, I think I forget, it's probably in a million movies, but follow the flow of money and you'll figure out how the business works. And, that was one thing I learned pretty quickly, which was if you figured out where the revenue came from, you could figure out the business model quickly and then figure out where do you plug in yourself from a marketing perspective. And then, the third thing I would say is really understanding that combination of marketing and sales and how closely aligned, if not the same thing, they really are. So in a lot of ways, in a lot of organizations, and I'll say especially here, marketing is sales, sales is marketing, and it's a lot of semantics, but really being able to, I heard a lot of, I've hired enough people and worked with enough people who will always come in and they'll say, it's always a red flag for me for a marketing person to say, I don't like sales, I hate sales. And then to me, it's like, well, then you're in the wrong industry, because if you don't have them selling, you're not going to be doing your job marketing. And so, matter of fact, I usually tell my marketing staffs wherever I've been, I said, you know what? Your best friend is the sales team, because when they hit their numbers, that means you're going to get your bonus.
Absolutely. It works together. You can't have one without the other. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. And I think, so for me, I think some of that was just learning by osmosis of, even when you're marketing, it's like, hey, the best ideas in the world are great ideas, but if they're not moving the needle for the business, whether that's your client or that's the company you work for, you got to go back to the drawing board and find out a better solution.
Absolutely. So what advice would you give to other CMOs out there who are coming up the ranks, who are currently in charge of a new company? What advice would you give them?
Lean on your network, lean on people you trust, reach out, broaden people that you talk to, be open to new ideas, be open to listening. I think I learn something new every day, and I apply something new every day. It's just having conversations with somebody like yourself, Thomas, is helpful, because you don't know what you don't know, and you only learn that by keeping your ears open and listening.
Well, it's the same thing in nature. What's growing is not dying. If it's not growing, it is dying. So you need to learn, and your brain needs to be activated every single day. I think that's fundamental. We have to really be thirsty for new knowledge, because the job we do as CMOs, but also because the industry and the market, everything is constantly evolving.
So much so. I always reflect on it. It's funny you asked that question, Thomas, because even today I was reflecting on having been, Celero, we've been around for about 3 years, and, reflecting back and thinking about some of the things I thought or I did just 2 years ago, and now going, God, I wish I had kind of not done it that way or done it a little differently. And I can go back to any of my jobs. And that's why I think, coming up the ranks, it's like, take a deep breath, listen, take the time to really, absorb what's going around in that company. If you're coming into a company that has been around for a while, I think it's a little different. If you're a startup, you might be coming in and you're going to be leaned on real heavily to be able to really drive things. If it's a more established company, make sure you understand what's going on and absorb what's, information that you can take in from operations and technology and sales and service and the product teams. I mean, because all of those things will help shape what you decide to do. And don't assume you have all the answers, because that is one thing my wife reminds me every day. I have none of the answers.
We're always working on me. Yes. A question, which is, there's no right answer, but I'm trying to figure this out myself. Is it the story that's more important, or is the numbers the more important from a CMO's point of view?
Wow, that's a great question. My old business partner was the head of creative, and I knew him for a very long time, and I know what his answer would be.
Yeah.
It's one of those, it's the yin and the yang. You can't have one without the other. Well, it's funny, because I can look at that, and I even think about successes and failures I've had in my career and go, I can look at the numbers and go, wow, that thing really panned out really well, and I did not see that coming. Now I can go back, and as a good marketer, I can spin that story that was exactly what we were doing when we went into it. And it works the other way too. I mean, we can have a great story and it just doesn't resonate. And I think we touched on that earlier. You got to be able to read your audience. And, I think that's another key thing as a CMO, or just as a human being, is being able to adjust, adapt to your environment and to the change around you. COVID taught all of us a lot of things, and whatever side of that discussion you fall on, the one thing you can't say is that it didn't change the way the whole world looks at what goes on around you. And, for our business alone, it had a lot of negative impact, but it also had a lot of positive impact. So,
well, a lot of trade was done online, which is, of course, transaction, which is, of course, revenue for you. So that's the good part of it. But adjusting that change that's constantly happening, that we have, how to respond to that, how to respond to that challenge, how do we rise to that occasion? Like we said earlier, success has many fathers and failure has very few, right? It's just, it's all about
so true.
How we, the internal story we tell ourselves, the external story we tell our team, and then, of course, the story we tell towards the marketplace and how we perceive that. That's important. So, You mentioned that a little bit about the ups and downs. So what keeps you up at night? What are you worried about for a 3-year-old company? What's the challenges for you ahead?
A lot of our growth has come through acquisition. So a lot of what keeps us up is, it's what I talked about earlier. It's that brand and culture for just our company, and trying, anytime you bring new companies, new people into an organization, they come with their own mindset, right? They come with their own history, their own backstory. And so it's, how do you take, a lot of times it's taking the best of whatever you're bringing in and molding it with the best of what our organization is, obviously without losing sight that we've got our own culture and we've got our own brand that, isn't going to change every time we bring in a new company, but there are parts of what comes in new that can bolster what we are, or they're a piece of the puzzle that makes us stronger in a certain area. And so it's just, I guess keeping me up is just always thinking, okay, what's next, and where are we headed next, and how is that going to fit into that overall brand of Celero Commerce?
Exactly. So some of these new acquisitions you do, they have their own story, they have their own marketing. Do they keep that, or do you integrate into one unit, or how's your approach from a marketing point of view when you integrate with a new company?
For us in particular, we have integrated all of the acquisitions other than the SaaS companies we've purchased. So the SaaS companies that we own that operate in the digital space with a brand, and obviously just, their business model, it's a little more difficult to integrate it and change it to Celero Commerce. And I'm not sure that would be the right approach anyways. But the core payments companies that we've brought in, be it a direct to merchant or a bank channel partnership or an integrated software vendor partnership, those we tend to turn into the Celero brand, or they migrate over to the Celero brand over a certain time period. And each one is, and to your point, they each are a little different. So we have treated each one individually. We have a model of how we do that, but we kind of mold that model around those brands to make sure that it works for them too.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. What's the 5-year vision when you were 3 years old as a company? You're starting to walk now. What's the next thing for the company?
Well, obviously we have a large private equity company that backs us, and so they have a vision for where they're taking us. And I think for us, we're being good stewards of that brand that we're building, and in partnership with them, kind of mapping out what is step one, what is step two, what is step three, and I think go back to that adjusting, and COVID changes plans, so timelines change, and how do you adjust to that? So I think, again, knowing the vision of where they want us to go, as the marketing guy, I look more, I probably have a different take on that than the CEO or our CFO would per se, right? My take is more, hey, where's this? I'm the steward of this brand for them, and they have a big investment in this. So how do I make sure that myself as the marketing head takes care of that brand, shepherds it along, and keeps growing the brand value in the marketplace, which is a much different measurement, as we all know, than looking at pure numbers or the bottom line, right? Or that EBITDA number. Does it help? Does it help towards that? Absolutely, it does. And it does in many different ways. And so my job is to make sure all those different ways are being stewarded appropriately.
All right, Scott, it's been absolutely a pleasure having you here. I'm sure we could talk for many more hours, but I know you're busy and we've got to get on with our day. But thank you so much for being in the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Thomas. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to doing it again someday.
I hope so. Thank you, Scott. Thanks. At the end of each episode, I always bring in Zane. And who is Zane? Zane is our producer who's keeping us sane, as I jokingly say. Zane is our producer who makes sure we sound good and that this get edited and it gets sent out to all the podcasts out there. And what's great is that Zane has been listening in the background, and I bring him into the conversation. So what do you think about Celero and Scott and what they're doing?
Something that was really interesting about the model that Celero is working with, I think, was how Scott was talking about how one of their biggest marketing tools is making sure that their clients or the people that they're working with, like banks or whatever, actually are well supported to deal with their clients. So as they're kind of like working on this meta level to help their clients make their consumers then happy. I think that's a really interesting an interesting position to be in because you don't have the direct control.
No. All you can do is dress them up for the part, right? And teach them what to say and teach them what to wear and teach them what to do. But at the end of the day, you're relying on someone else that they can bring in, whether that's consumers, as you said, or it's probably merchant people selling stuff down the street, right? That go through the bank, but using their system. So
and I think that's a business model that I don't think we've really touched on before, where the support that you give your clients is then consumed by somebody else, and there's this weird filter that it goes through.
How can we make our client better? How can we make sure we can serve them better?
The other thing that Scott said that I think has been said before and is kind of reflective of that as well is that their biggest marketing spend is their people. The people, so that everyone involved with the business knows what the business is about, where the business is going, what the values are, I think, and that really shows through with like the enthusiasm that Scott talks about. Time and time again, he came back to how he was talking up his people, how his people go out and they do this and people go out and do that. I think that really reinforces that ethos that runs through Celero.
And also the whole
conflict, stress, love relationship between the marketing department and the sales department, because one cannot exist without the other, right? So as you pointed out, you in the marketing, you got to really help and love your sales team, because without them, you're not getting a bonus. So in other words, the bottom line of what you do is getting improved by your sales team. So have those teams work on that. And we've touched on that in the other podcast, because sometimes the marketing team is blaming the sales team is blaming the marketing team, but you got to get them to work together as a unit, even though it's two separate departments. And that's a challenge. And from a CMO's perspective, where you're supposed to just look out for the marketing team. I like that he's saying, well, we cannot live without the sales team. So have that coherence, have that teamwork between those two departments is key.
It is a cycle, and they can either make each other stronger, or they can kind of work against each other.
Exactly. They can sabotage one another, which leads to, that's not a good outcome for anybody.
No, but honestly, I think Scott has a great philosophy when it comes to making his sales team part of the marketing.
I like that a lot. It was really interesting. So it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zane, let's do another one.
Let's do another one.
Thanks, Zane. Bye.